Kevin Bowen here. Don't forget
Welcome
to listen
back.
to The
Another
Fan
edition of
now
Kevin's
on
Corner.
93.5 or 107.5 FM, and check out our latest coverage online at 1075thefan.com.
The world about to come to an end. Frank Reich caught up with us earlier today. Kind of I would say an annual thing, but honestly, it usually takes place in Florida or Arizona. Today was supposed to be the league's annual meetings. They were scheduled to be in Florida. One year it's in Arizona, the next year it's in Florida to appease owners on other sides of the country. And so Frank Reich typically talks for about an hour every owners' meetings at a little breakfast and recaps, and all head coaches do this. They have an AFC breakfast and an NFC breakfast, and instead of Frank Reich doing that today in Florida, the Colts are practicing social distancing to the full effect, and so Frank Reich was at home. Had a little Zoom call, a few awkward media members not unmuting themselves, but that's neither here nor there. I won't reveal any names, but we got through the call. Some great insight from Frank Reich. We'll hit on a lot of that on today's podcast. And then talk about TJ Carrie, the new cornerback that the Colts signed on Monday. God, all these days, they just run together at this point. And we'll get into Twitter questions. I know I promised more Twitter questions. Last time I lied. When Frank Reich talks for a half hour, that covers a meaty portion of the podcast. So that'll, again, be the main focus for today. There's still about a dozen or so Twitter questions that you guys have sent me that I'll go over. And then you would think it'd be quieter early April, even mid-April. That's when I'll get into more of a 50%, maybe even more than that. Twitter question filled podcast, because I know a lot of you guys have insights and I haven't just tweeted out, time for another Colts podcast like I usually do. Good news for those of you that have been bugging me about Spotify. I shouldn't say bugging me. It more just helps you guys out that listen to your podcast through Spotify. We are now up on Spotify. So check that out. Kevin's Corner over there. Just got word from that earlier today on Tuesday. So for those of you, again, that consume podcasts via Spotify, head over there. Apple, Stitcher, YouTube. We are pretty much every place. If there's anything else that I miss, like from a podcast standpoint, if you guys are curious, if we aren't on some podcast platform, just let me know. I assume we're pretty much everywhere where people listen on a consistent basis, but always good to know that we are readily available for you when need be. All right, let's start with Frank Reich. Again, talked for a little bit over a half hour today, mainly about the quarterback position. We'll get into kind of the Phillip Rivers decision, Jacoby Brissett's role. He mentioned Tom Brady and the possible pursuit that the Colts would have had for the 5 or 6 time Super Bowl winner, whatever he is. Adam Vinatieri talk wideout depth as well. But as I mentioned, Zoom life seems to be the life for just about everybody right now. It's certainly life for the Colts. Frank Reich mentioned that's pretty much how they're, kind of operating right now. Reich has a Zoom meeting every day with the scouting department and Chris Ballard as they get ready for the draft. It's absurd to me that the draft is 3 weeks from Thursday. While I say that March seems like the longest month in the world, I also feel like the draft always sneaks up on me. But yeah, 3 weeks from Thursday. Beers with Bowen will be 2 weeks from Thursday. That'll be a virtual one. I'll touch on that a little bit later in the podcast. But Zoom life is the way of life for the Colts right now. Offensive meetings, Nick Sirianni leading those. Defensive meetings, Matt Eberflus leading those with their respective position coaches. That's via Zoom. And the offseason program for the Colts was supposed to start April 20th. Again, that's the in-person stuff. So think of, strength and conditioning. You can meet in person. That's for like a 2-week period. And then the next couple of weeks you get into individual drills. And then the final month-ish of that 9-week offseason program is when you get into team activities. 7-on-7, 11-on-11, stuff like that. So that has been delayed. My opinion, I'd be a little bit surprised if that happens, considering where we are at right now from again, social distancing standpoint. But there's a chance that obviously virtually the coaching staffs of these teams can get with players, via Zoom or whatnot. Shout out to Jenna Fisher, who works for Zoom. That company is just booming. Jenna Fisher, great friend of of myself and certainly my wife. They survived Barcelona together back in college, which is a minor miracle, but that's neither here nor there. Again, Frank Reich has pretty much said that the contingency plans are in place. They are ready to go if need be on April 20th if the NFL is like, all right, you can hold meetings with your guys. I don't know if you're getting all whatever. I think the Colts have like 70 players on their roster right now. Get all 70 people on the old Zoom meeting. But obviously position groups, maybe it's all right, a half hour with each player for each position coach, things like that. And fans should just love Frank Reich's just genuine nature when he talked about it, of him like challenging his coaching staff and saying, guys, we've got to find a competitive advantage through all of this. And I think it's a cool sort of aspect of Frank Reich. Like, I mean, I've actually talked to him about technology before and just, that entire world for people his age. And, he's got guys on his coaching staff that are older than him and things like that. It can be a bit challenging. Football coaches, sometimes they just want the reel and pop in the old tape and go from there. But this is, again, the reality of, the world that we're living in right now. So the Colts, from an IT department and from a scouting standpoint and a coaching staff standpoint as well, they are ready for whatever is thrown at them in trying to teach as much as they can. Again, it's only about, 5 hours per day, 4 days a week, I want to say. So it's not a lot, but it's still some valuable times to, install new things, tweak some verbiage, obviously get your new guys up to speed, and just general camaraderie and having guys under your own watchful eye. I think this is different than like college football players right now. But, college football players that are used to training tables don't make money. Well, maybe some of the SEC players make money, but you know what I'm getting at. Like, the college athletes right now, it's a big disadvantage. Some people go home and they might not have the same sort of advantages that some of their own players or their fellow teammates have in their hometowns from a resource standpoint, from just a home life standpoint. The NFL, at least everyone is making money, but still, it's on a little bit of a different plan. So I'll be curious to see how the NFL does indeed decide to operate with the offseason program here, likely virtually starting on April 20th. All right, so Philip Rivers talk. Reich made it clear that this is a really unique opportunity. That was a phrase that he used several times, and I think what he's saying there is it was the opportunity to upgrade in the short term and feel like Jacoby Brissett was still a competent option. I think the word that Frank Reich used in describing Jacoby was content. Is that the biggest compliment in the world? No. But it's a better compliment than you would give a, a Scott Tolzien or a Curtis Painter. So, and I think that's probably how I would describe it. Okay, Jacoby's in the bottom, whatever, half, third, fourth, whatever you want to say, of the league as a starting caliber quarterback in this league. But if you have the chance to upgrade the most important position in sports, you're going to do it. And that's what the Colts feel like they are doing. And again, I am a fan of doing something different. You guys know full well I'm a big ceiling person, raising the ceiling. If you can do that here in the short term in 2020 and doing it with a different style quarterback, and we'll get into that a little bit more on future podcasts, just taking a deeper dive into how different and what will it look like. And honestly, Frank Reich mentioned some of this today, just what it will look like with Rivers under center. But I am a fan of trying to, we knew full well what it was going to look like with X player under center. Let's do something that is, not out of the ordinary per se, but just something that you feel good about. And the Colts feel good about this situation. Frank Reich was bullish on the physical limitations of Philip Rivers not being an issue. He watched every single play of Rivers the last 2 seasons. He offered this quote: physically, does he still have it? all left in the tank at 38, just having been there on the inside on the 3 years I was, and knowing the quarterback position like I do, I was so confident that physically he was the right player and he had not lost anything. All the throws that I saw on film, as I go back and study them compared to previous throws, I really didn't notice any physical gifts diminishing at all. I really didn't. So, again, that is Frank Reich's belief on Phillip Rivers from a physical standpoint, but I feel like that is kind of the biggest question people have. Maybe turnovers would be the other one, and you could, I guess, throw both of those in the same category, but I will touch on that. Reich hit home the strengths of Phillip Rivers, and that is getting the ball out quick, not afraid to pushing it downfield. And then what I thought was maybe the most interesting aspect of what Frank Reich had to say today was he feels like Rivers has a big advantage in helping the Colts tap into some of the read pass option stuff that when Frank Reich was hired, you just felt like it was going to be such a key component to this offense. And certainly last year, we did not see it used enough or consistently or efficiently. And, when I first heard this, I'm like, wait, what? Phillip Rivers RPO? I'm like, my Slick Leonard bobblehead doll here on my desk moves a little bit faster than old Phil. But he mentioned that more from an intellectual, quick processing standpoint. And as I thought about it more, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. RPOs are here are 4 options thrown at you in an instant. You've got to process all that very quickly, and you've got to make the right reads. Now, you won't have the element of the quarterback with his legs with Rivers, but you will have the element of, okay, there's the unblocked defensive end. Is he crashing on Marlon Mack? Is he staying at home? Is Jack Doyle there in the flat? What is the weak side linebacker doing? Like, are corners pressing? That, I think, that cognitive aspect of Rivers, that's where they feel like he can give them something from an RPO standpoint that, again, is just a little bit more than they got out of Jacoby Brissett and the offense in general last year in 2019. So it's not going to look like RPO of, hey, here's Lamar Jackson, but it is just a little bit of a different it'll be different looking, but it's still such a key element of this offense, getting more out of the passing game, because you can make that yards per attempt number. You can kind of manipulate it a little bit if you just hit on 3 big chunks in an entire game. And sometimes that's enough. But I think something that Reich pointed to was just more of a consistent, like intermediate 10, 12-yard plays. And if you can do that, whatever, a dozen times a game, then all of a sudden your passing offense can become a more of a consistent attack. He mentioned that he felt like Rivers knows 80 to 85% of the playbook at least, which is huge for any sort of player coming into a new situation. Let's be honest, Tampa Bay's not having that with Tom Brady. And it could even mean more this offseason when, there's no offseason program. Is training camp limited in any way? I mean, those are real questions that every NFL organization is having right now as we sit here on March 31st. So the fact that he knows, over 80% of your own playbook and just a little bit of verbiage tweakage, that's great. That's huge. So the elite intellectually what was another phrase that Reich really wanted to drive home about Rivers. And I think it comes back to what the Colts hope they can do is out chess match and play from ahead. And I think playing from ahead might be the biggest factor in all of this. And we'll get into that when I talk about Reich's thoughts on the 20 interceptions that Rivers did throw last season. Reich hopes that Rivers will be around, which is a lofty goal, but they hope to be pushing 70% completion percentage. Now, that is not a number the Colts sniffed very often last season. I think they ended the year just under 60% as a completion percentage. Rivers was 66 last year. He was 68 the year before. Now, and I'll get into this. I noticed one Twitter question that I definitely wanted to hit on with this, but I did a little bit more research. I know you guys have heard me say over the past few podcasts, I have a concern about the lack of bigger body wideouts here in Indianapolis. And I felt like there was a lot of merit to that. And then I dove a little bit deeper into the stats, and there's a whole lot more merit than I even thought about that. So again, we'll touch on that. But I'm just throwing those numbers out there just so you know what Rivers has typically been. He's hovered kind of around mid-60s in his career as a passer. What did Andrew Luck have? 68? Let me see if I can dial that up. God, I swear I miss Joey Molinaro. You guys watch Tiger King? It was outstanding. I could watch a documentary on 13 of those characters. Any of them. Enthralled. You know me, I don't watch Netflix very often, but boy, that was a good laugh. Needed laugh at this time. 67.3% for Andrew Luck. That was a career high for Andy back in 2018 with Frank Reich. You know, I if you can get to 68, 69, somewhere around there, you're going to sign off on that. Philip Rivers' career high was with Frank Reich. I think it was 68.5 back in 2013. So those are some of the things that the Colts feel like they can tap into, why they like Rivers. And I think going back to the out chess match RPO sort of talk, if there's been one thing that this staff has publicly stated about, okay, Jacoby didn't do this well enough, this is where he needs to improve, it was the quick decision making. It was the, here's your read, know where the ball needs to go, and do it in a faster manner. And that comes back to the point of like, okay, getting the ball out quicker, general accuracy on some of the underneath stuff, those things. And while some might disagree with this, and you know, I would disagree to a point, but not totally, because I went back and watched a lot of all 22 film of past Colts games throughout the 2019 season. I'll never forget that Houston game, that Thursday nighter down there, where that game, you know, could have turned the season in a much more positive direction down the stretch. That game, the coaching staff was adamant that guys were open. They did not shy away from that. They felt like there were opportunities to be made in the vertical passing game. And those opportunities just didn't, basically the trigger wasn't pulled enough in their mind. And that's something that Rivers is going to do. He's going to make, in their eyes, he'll make the right reads, he'll pull the trigger. Now, that gets into the next topic of the turnovers and the pros and cons that come with a guy that is going to be more of a risk taker. And Reich was, you know, very honest that the 20 interception number was unacceptable, which, you know, if Frank Reich's saying that, just picture the coach from Last Chance U, just picture him just cussing like none other. So I'm looking at Rivers' interceptions, 20 last year. 17 of those 20 came with the Chargers tied or trailing. 15 of the 20 came from them just flat out losing. So 75% of his interceptions came from when the Chargers were losing. So don't get down. You know? I mean, it sounds pretty simple, and I know you guys are going to be like, all right, well, Kevin, I'm going to turn off the podcast. That's the dumbest thing that I've heard you say in the history of this podcast, which there's a lot of dumb shit that I've said on this podcast, so I appreciate you lasting over 200 episodes. But I think what I'm getting at here is more so the Colts feel like they're a better football team than the Chargers. They feel like they have improved as a defense. They feel like their run game is better, and their offensive line is better. And when you factor in all of those things, they believe they'll be playing from ahead a little bit more. And so Rivers won't be in this situation to where he's got to force things or he's got to play catch up. That is the goal. Obviously, it's the goal for 32 NFL teams. But this is I'm trying to peel the curtain back of like, why the Colts feel like this is an upgrade. I would say the quote from Reich that stood out to me the most, from him talking for a half hour, and for any of you that might have missed it, head to 1075thefan.com. I've got a full notebook rundown. I'll break out into some individual articles with some more analytical look at things here in the coming days and weeks. But that's kind of your one-stop shop for everything that Reich had to say. But this quote, again, stood out to me the most. And this is about Rivers and just the risk-taking. Frank Reich saying this: as long as he thinks he has a chance to win, he's throwing the ball down the field. And when other quarterbacks might be taking checkdowns, he's trying to make chunk plays. You know, I don't want to put words in Frank Reich's mouth, but how do you not hear that and not think about last year's quarterback situation to what you have here right now? There's just an element to providing more 50-50 opportunities for your wideouts and tight ends. And again, playing from ahead has got to play into that as well. But I just think that weighed a little bit on this coaching staff of like, they felt like there were chances, plural, to be made with their wideouts or their pass catchers in general, creating separation, creating some sort of openings, or just simply, hey, throw the ball up and let that guy go and make a play. And again, we'll get into that a little bit later on what the personnel looks like. But Reich later added that the goal certainly is to cut down on those interceptions, and we just think we'll have the right team around him to get that number down where it needs to be. So that's a little bit of insight on the Philip Rivers thing. He mentioned that he watched every game Tom Brady played over the last 2 years, and this is something that Joey and I know certainly hit on back earlier in 2020. You look into Tom Brady, you look into everybody. You're watching film on Carr and Stafford, anyone that you think could potentially be on the open market. You analyze and you watch every play. And Reich loved what he saw from Brady. Felt like down the field, he made some throws vertically that he was like, whoa. For his age, that is, I mean, Frank Reich gushing over Tom Brady. Now, all of you out there are like, well, then why not pursue Tom Brady? I think the Colts I think they like Rivers. And the fact that they don't have to rework as much as the playbook and things like that. And then having said that, I think maybe the biggest aspect is the commitment to Brady for 2 to 3 years versus the commitment to Rivers for 1 to 2. And the fact that getting either of them isn't all of a sudden going to mean, oh, they're a Super Bowl team, no questions asked. Like, no. I think the Colts know the reality of, like, are you going to get better with either of them? Yeah. Or does one of them all of a sudden make you a Super Bowl team? No. So if you can have the out earlier, that's more advantageous to you long term. And that's where you are with Rivers right now in the 1-year deal. You know, Reich mentioned 1 or 2, but, you know, contractually, you have that out. Now, who would be that quarterback starting for in 2021? Who the hell knows? But that and he did throw in the caveat of, like, you know, every camp had to be on the same page, and that includes Brady's camp. And if the Colts were steadfast in saying, no, 1-year deal is all we feel good about giving out, then that could have been the official deal breaker. All right, Jacoby Brissett stuff. As you'd expect, Brissett wasn't happy about the Rivers decision. He shouldn't be happy. You know, he's a competitor, and that's exactly what you want. I love that Reich, after about the 3rd or 4th Jacoby Brissett question, it was similar to Chris Ballard's reaction at the at the combine about Brissett. Reich used the phrase, "For crying out loud, we got off to a 5-2 start," when describing Jacoby Brissett. Frank Reich saying "for crying out loud," that's like whatever, a normal human being saying, "Are you effing kidding me, people?" That's Frank Reich cussing like none other. But it goes back to, again, what they think of Jacoby. They still like him and believe that they have a really quality backup that, as Frank Reich said earlier today, can still be a starter in this league. He unprompted brought that up on several occasions. And again, I don't think you're creating smoke trying to stir up some big trade value that is magically going to appear. Where's Jacoby Brissett going to go right now and compete for a starting job or be a starter? I mean, I don't see a lot of teams. Cam Newton, seemingly, it's difficult for him to find a home that would be a starting quarterback. And Reich was adamant that to be a championship-type football team, and certainly his background with the Eagles is the ideal blueprint for this. You have to have a backup that can step in and win a couple of games if you need him to. And I don't disagree with that. I mean, I think from a backup standpoint, Jacoby Brissett can come in and can give you a football team that can go win a game on a Sunday afternoon. I don't disagree with that at all. Now, we can get in the argument, and I certainly have in this podcast, of, is that guy worth the $21 million cap hit that he is here in 2020? And then, what do you do come draft time? And Reich mentioned that, they are evaluating quarterbacks, and one or two or three that they like. Okay, if that guy is there in the draft, so many factors have to play into, the Colts being there on the clock and that matching up with what's on the board and all of that. So again, I everything I heard from Frank Reich today just further reiterated, maybe I think I stressed it on Friday's podcast, of there is a decent to better than decent chance Jacoby Brissett's on this football team come week 1. Now, maybe the most head-scratching thing that Reich said all day long, and I guess I'll throw in the caveat of I really appreciate Frank Reich having this 30-minute talk, but this is one where I was just kind of like, wait, you're going to have to show me more. I'm a little bit confused by this. It was when he mentioned using Jacoby in 5 to 7 plays as a gadget player throughout the course of a game. Now, you guys know full well that I'm obsessed with gadget stuff, doing things differently, read option or pre-snap motion, misdirection stuff, like all of that I love. I think it's great. I think it's innovative, and I'm a huge fan of it. But when I heard this, I'm thinking to myself, it sounds like a college coach who is trying to appease the 5-star freshman quarterback so he doesn't transfer, or so, dad isn't calling. Like, oh gosh, boy, we really need to create a package for, Brandon Wimbush. Like, I think I like Ian Book a little bit more, but, Wimbush has got that high ceiling, or whatever. Like, that was my first thought. I was kind of like, wait, what? Because when I think of gadget players or Taysom Hill's coming into the game, that all of a sudden means blinkers on and caution sign everywhere for the opposing defense. All right, red alert, whatever. Taysom Hill's coming in the game. What does he do well? Well, he runs well. He's a very good athlete. For a dual threat quarterback, Jacoby Brissett is not that. He is not that. From a lateral movement, tuck it. Can he make, can he break tackles? Can he shed guys? Yeah, but that comes more to me in the course of a play of in the pocket, not a designed, hey, we know there's going to be guys that are going to grab him, but we're going to design it because we believe he can just shed them in the open field. I don't know. I just and Reich mentioned, he wouldn't get into details, which obviously it's a competitive advantage standpoint. He's not going to say this, but there are some specific things situationally that he felt like Jacoby did really well last year. And I know the Colts were really good in the red zone. They were 6th in the league last year in the red zone. For a while, they were pretty good on third down, kind of regressed to more middle of the pack, but we're still a little bit better than that. But I'm just thinking to myself, okay, what does that guy do that you would consider a blue trait that you would put on the field for a certain scenario? And I'm just I'm just confused by that. Great quarterback sneaker, okay. Protects the ball really well, yes, for sure. But again, 5 to 7 plays, I don't know. I was very confused by that. I don't know where Reich was getting at, but who knows? Who knows what we'll see? And I guess when I just think of gadget stuff, you think of more of dual threat capabilities, read option things, really quarterback having that leg element. I think is a big part of it. We saw it with Tennessee bringing Mariota onto the field during the playoffs. So again, I was a little bit confused by that, but Jacoby Brissett, your 2020 backup. I think it'll happen, but we'll talk on April 25th when the draft is over, and we'll see what happens then. All right, Adam Vinatieri, haven't talked to him in a few weeks. Those are Frank Reich's words, letting the rehab process play out with Vinny. I guess the Colts are being cordial here. Again, I'm rolling with Chase McLaughlin. If I'm the one making these decisions, I don't need a kicking competition. I don't. But I always felt like this would be something that would play out deeper than just March. And right now, your free agents are Vinatieri and Clayton Geathers and Jabal Sheard and Chester Rogers and Dontrell Inman and Jonathan Williams, I think is the 6th one. Some of those guys I'd look into bringing back. Some of them probably want fresh starts elsewhere. They might wait till after the draft, to see if all of a sudden a position group opens up for another team or something like that. But yeah, that was the update on Vinny. Wideout depth, he mentioned that he likes it, but this is something that Frank Reich, admittedly, he kind of says is a bit of a fault of like, when you're a coach, you always think what you have internally you can win with. Like, that's just part of a coach mindset. Now, the key thing is separating that from, okay, I love my guys, but will you show me the film on that guy just again? Wait, I can go get that guy? It's that stuff that you've got to think about. And I believe that the Colts have that on and need to have that on, certainly, to be successful. But, when he talked about wideout depth, he mentions 3 guys. Hilton, Campbell, and Pascal. Well, that's, again, I don't hear a Steve Ishmael, Reese Fountain, whatever. And we know full well what happened to the wideout depth last year. And I think something about Hilton that we have to keep an eye on, and you guys know full well what I think of T.Y. Hilton. I think he's a tremendous receiver. I think his career has not been appreciated enough here in Indianapolis. I mean, we're talking about I'm pretty sure he was a very late 3rd-round draft pick. And he's played like a bona fide number 1. Now, I will say this. When you dive into the numbers with luck at quarterback and without luck, that's where we get into the T.Y. Hilton tier that I think we're going to find out a lot about this season. Because when the Colts have had Andrew Luck, okay, they've had a whatever, top 5 quarterback in the league, wherever you want to slot Luck. Bless you. But when they haven't had Luck, it's, Matt Hasselbeck or Charlie Whitehurst. Charlie Whitehurst, who was he married to? That famous actress. Or maybe she's a singer. Sheryl Crow? Cher? One of the two. I don't know. Sheryl Crow's probably married to somebody famous as well. I probably totally butchered that. But Lance Armstrong, my wife chimes in with. They're divorced. Thank you. So, yeah, Charlie Whitehurst, obviously, Josh Freeman, Ryan Lindley, what other quarterbacks? Jacoby, Scott Tolzien. Again, it's been like almost the other end of the spectrum. Well, Phillip Rivers certainly is much closer, I would say much closer to luck than he is the other end of the spectrum of at least some of those guys. So what I'm getting at is, where does Hilton fall in the tier? With Andrew Luck, is he a top 5 wideout in the league? Probably, maybe top 7. Some might argue top 10, whatever. If you look at his numbers without Luck, it's like top 30 wideout in this league. So if your number one wideout is top 30, and then you're relying on Paris Campbell and Zach Pascal to be your slam dunk 2 and 3, boy, I'm not sleeping great at night. And I'm a huge fan of Campbell and think the Phillip Rivers signing is great for him. But Reich did throw in the caveat of certainly receivers, a position that they are looking hard at. So, again, the Colts will have to show their cards come draft night. All right, one more thing from Reich. I asked him about DeForest Buckner and that trade and what he kind of thought when Chris Ballard came to him and was like, hey, I'm giving up the 13th overall pick. Reich referenced Tony Dungy having a coaching clinic. This is after Dungy left the Colts. So what was Dungy's last year? Was it, I don't know why 07 is popping in my head. Let me look that up real fast. You guys watched that Manning Bowl the other night? First Manning Bowl? I watched the first drive, and the drive took way too long, so I stopped watching. But, God, Peyton Manning was just a precise individual. He's just a surgeon out there. And Dominique Rhodes. I love Rhodes. That was a fun watch. 08, the last year for Dungy. So Dungy comes back, Reich thought 2009, 2010, coaching clinic, whatever, and reiterates to them what how important the 3 technique is to this defense. And it was just kind of ingrained to Reich, even as an offensive coach. That was just so, really drilled home of like, in this defense, you've got to have that 3 technique. And, I mean, these are my words, not Reich's. When I start plugging in defensive players and looking at the starters, looking at the depth, I'm very, very excited to watch this defense play. Really, really eager to see all the moving parts, where guys fit in, see if anything else happens in the draft. Do guys make jumps? How good is a guy like DeForest Buckner? How does a cornerback depth play out? Huge year for Malik Hooker, Bobby Okereke, stepping into year 2. Like, I just think this defense has some really intriguing potential from a personnel standpoint that I'm really, really excited to see here in 2020. All right, before we hop into Twitter questions, let's hit on TJ Carrie a little bit. The Colts signed him on Monday. So their second 29-year-old corner that they have signed, Xavier Rhodes being the other. Rhodes certainly the more accomplished on the high end, although Carrie started a lot in his career. Head to 1075thefan.com if you missed Xavier Rhodes explaining why he felt like he struggled the last 2 years, why he chose the Colts as well. Had a conference call with him on Monday, and I thought he was really candid about some of that stuff. But TJ Carrie, been in the league for 6 years, 4 years with Oakland, 2 years in Cleveland. Why did the Colts make this move? 2 reasons, okay? Versatile corner who has history playing as a slot guy. Now, some of you might be like, who the hell cares? Kenny Moore's the slot. Shut up. You want to watch the last month of the season again when Kenny Moore didn't play? I mean, holy hell. You talk about a dumpster fire of a pass defense. I mean, the defense just got shredded through the air. And it started in the Tennessee game, which I think is when Kenny Moore got hurt first at Lucas Oil. Again, when you look back on it, one of the biggest games of the season. Kenny Moore gets hurt. Roland Milligan slides into the slot. Ryan Tannehill, 3rd and 10. I think the Titans were up. I want to say they're up 7 maybe, but a big play in terms of can you put the nail in the proverbial coffin. And boy, there's that Raymond guy, deep post, beautiful ball by Tannehill, beats Milligan, touchdown. Great coaching, knowing full well Kenny Moore's out. And then the Colts get shredded by Winston and shredded by Drew Brees and shredded by Gardner Minshew. And, you know, the nickel means so much in this defense. It's one of those, what does Eberflus call it? A pressure spot? Hot spot. That's what he calls it, a hot spot of just a lot of activity. And so I think that's where Carrie comes into play. He could be potentially your backup nickel. And when you look at this roster of Xavier Rhodes and Marvell Tell and Rock Yassin, there's just not a backup nickel. Quincy Wilson, you guys saw how much he played late in the season, clearly. You know, even in that Saints game, he got in there and got a little grabby and struggled. So, I mean, Chris Ballard, unprompted this offseason, was like, we had a major drop-off when we lost Kenny Moore. We've got to get better there. So I think that's where Carrie comes into play. And when I initially saw this move, I'm like, oh, week 3 of free agency, here comes a guy to compete for a roster spot. Now I look at it, I'm like, well, as long as he hasn't fallen off a cliff, I feel like he's going to make the team. And, you know, certainly we'll see how the draft plays out and things like that. But he struggled in coverage last year. I don't want to mince words there. But again, if this guy's playing primarily in the slot, the coverage responsibilities there, they are certainly needed, but it's different types of coverage responsibilities. And I just think there's more on your plate. You're blitzing, you're more of in a tackling run support role, those sorts of things. And at 6 foot, 204 pounds, I think that's where they feel like Carrie can come into play. And I want to reiterate, like, Chris Ballard was pissed about how poor of play they got out of that nickel position down the stretch. So this is why it is a big deal. He's also really durable. Played 72 straight games. That is the 3rd longest streak of any corner in the NFL. So, notable. Why did the Browns cut him? Andrew Berry, new GM coming in there. Carrie, I think, was due. I think he signed a 4-year, $31 million deal back in 2018. Played 2 years. Brown said, all right, sayonara, you struggled in coverage. We're going to cut you. Obviously, new coaching staff, scheme changes, all those sorts of things. They saved about $6 million. Andrew Berry cut, I think, 4 guys around that time. So, again, I'm not shocked by the move. I don't want to, like, act like I'm overlooking this. Carrie struggled in coverage last year. But, again, strong tackler, known for his blitzing. The nickel responsibilities are a little bit different here in Indianapolis. Boy, if you're Quincy Wilson, you probably didn't like seeing that move, though. I mean, right now, your corners, Xavier Rhodes, TJ Carrie, Kenny Moore, Marvell Tell, Quincy Wilson, Rock Yassin. 6 guys for 5 spots. Maybe draft a corner. Am I missing somebody? I don't think so. Carrie started 50 games in his career. So, I mean, he started a lot. But again, what I like now is, like, you see a resume like that. This gets back to some of my thoughts about the defense and why I'm intrigued by it. Like, in the past few years, when you see a resume like that, you're like, oh, that guy's going to come in here and start. Now we're debating if that guy's going to make the team. Like, that is great for the Colts' depth from a defensive standpoint. So, I'm intrigued. All right, we got about a dozen Twitter questions before we wrap up on this edition of Kevin's Corner. Appreciate you all tuning in. Hope you all are safe during this time. It's just crazy chaos, and the more it's starting to hit closer to home, it's just such a serious situation. So, hope I'm able to provide a little bit of break from some of that for you guys, and appreciate all of you reading and listening as well. Let's start with Matt. With today's call with Reich, what % chance would you give that the Colts select a quarterback in April? He alluded to him and Ballard being content with going forward as Jacoby being the backup quarterback, but getting the opportunity to pass on Rivers was too much to pass up. I'm not alone in Perspective being fine with Rivers as long as we draft a QB for 2021 and beyond. With Reich's sentiments today, seems like we won't go in that direction draft-wise. Thoughts? Let's not read all the way into that, Matt. I get why you see that. I'd say, all offseason long, I'd said, 98% chance the Colts draft a quarterback. As the offseason has played out, that number has lessened for me. I still look at it as a 70% chance the Colts draft a quarterback. I do. Some might say that's high, but I'll go 70. I think that's appealing. Just to see what you got, see what you can develop, and I think in the back of your mind you have to think about this: what happens if Phillip Rivers is just a 1-year deal? He falls off a cliff, and you don't draft a guy here in 2020. That means you hope you can re-sign Jacoby Brissett. Maybe at this point, Brissett's going to want a fresh start. He's not under. You have no quarterback under contract past 2020. Matt also asked, do you think it's more likely that Jacoby asks for a trade or that the Colts aren't blowing smoke about a decreasing in value asset and we go forward with him as quarterback number 2? Like I said earlier, where's Brissett going to go? Where? He can choose his own home next year. He'll only be, 28, 29, something like that? I can't see Brissett demanding a trade. Mitch, KB, this is a bigger hint. Is this a bigger hint of what to expect in a couple of weeks? He's referencing Frank Reich's comments about Jacoby in that gadget role. Mitch says, if we are thinking of making Jacoby a Taysom Hill type role, we are for sure drafting a quarterback unless Reich feels like Swag Kelly is a true backup QB in this league. Would love to get your thoughts on it on the pod. Like I said earlier, folks, Jacoby Brissett, if you look at raw combine numbers, not just we watched Jacoby Brissett in game film last year, he's just not a very athletic quarterback when you think of Taysom Hill or Lynn Bowden or whatever, Marcus Mariota, these other QBs that I guess have played that gadget role. We certainly see it much more in college than we do in the NFL. But yeah, I can't. I wish I had a better understanding of what Reich is getting at there, but I can't really see it. Tom says, all right, Coach Reich speaks so highly of Mr. Rivers. What a polite way to call it. I guess Phillip Rivers is old, 38. Yeah, I guess you do call him Mr. Rivers. I feel like he praised Vinny even more, and look how that went. Do you worry about Coach's ability to properly evaluate players that he's had a relationship with? Some examples: Rivers, Jacoby, and Vinatieri. Fair question, Tom. Reich was asked later on in the Zoom conference about Pierre Desir and parting ways with Pierre. And now he hasn't had the one-on-one sort of connection with Pierre that maybe you would have with Vinatieri from an age standpoint, or obviously Jacoby from a quarterback standpoint, and even Rivers, certainly 3 years in San Diego. But, he mentioned that and was very adamant that, when you are in the position that he is in, this is a prerequisite. This is something you have to have. Chris Ballard has to have it, and Frank Reich have to have it. You can love a guy, love his leadership, see all the sentimental aspects in it, think that he's a great guy for the community, for your locker room, all of that. But at the end of the day, insert my cliche quote here, the NFL is a business. And you have got to be able to remember that more than anything. It is a business. So, look, there's evidence, and the Vinatieri thing probably be the most damning of it. Honestly, from a Jacoby standpoint, if the Colts were going to run it back with Jacoby Brissett here in 2020, then I would throw him into that category. But, they aren't. They realize that Phillip Rivers is an upgrade. So, I think that is something that you have to keep in perspective here when talking about that. The Vinatieri thing, though, is just, who knows. Primus, Could it be that with the coronavirus making new alliances, unable to form solid foundations, and the old guard falling apart, Ballard saw the dominoes falling and, like a viper that had patiently laid in wait, knew this is the time to strike? Wow. Sounds like I've never watched Game of Thrones, but that sounds like an intro to Game of Thrones. Primus. I'm fired up. I'm ready to go. No, I don't, to be honest with you. I love the plot. Sounds great. But no, I don't think they were like, this is our chance. I just think the dominoes unfolded how it did. They were in need of a quarterback. They had great resources to use, and they used them. We've been harping on it for weeks, months, years. They've used those resources. And at this point, when you have missed the postseason like you have in 4 out of the last 5 years, you got to do things differently. Now, I do think the Colts can benefit from this. I do. From this whole, lack of in-person interaction. Certainly, they have a new quarterback, but, if Rivers can still get some guys together, bring your receivers together in 5 or 6 at a time, or just your main guys, I guess, get them together for a week in Florida. Hopefully social distancing will allow for that. You get some great working with your wideouts. And then from a playbook film session standpoint, technology takes care of itself. The Colts aren't implementing new systems on any phase of the game. So I do think it's something to benefit. I am curious, and I know that you didn't ask this, Primus, but if you look at the AFC right now, what the pecking order looks like. For the most part, we're through the bulk of free agency. We'll see what happens with Clowney, Yannick Ngakoue trade, things like that. The draft will, certainly shift some things, but Kansas City and Baltimore, I feel like we're pretty quiet. Baltimore did get Calais Campbell. Kansas City, they struck me as really quiet. But, they're still good. And I still think they're in a tier by themselves. But then you get to that next tier. Boy, there's a lot of teams. I feel like I could throw in there. And I think the Colts are honestly one of them. I kind of like Buffalo. Anybody else like Buffalo? If you ever have the chance to go to Niagara Falls, do it. Beautiful. Especially from the Canadian side. That's the only time I've been to Canada, though. All right, we had a question from Down Under. Colts, Rockets, Stars, Dodgers. Hey, Kevin, big fan of the pod. As a non-American, I find most other Colts content really narrow-minded and old school. Anyway, I had a take for the Colts draft. The more I think about it, the more I'm in favor of drafting 2 wideouts in the first 3 rounds. Okay, he mentions a lot more stuff, but we'll kind of paraphrase here. He mentions T.Y.'s age. Campbell is the only one under contract past 2020. That's a good point I haven't really thought too much about. Depth at the wide receiver position is good in this year's draft class. He thinks a rookie could actually start there. And Ballard isn't afraid to double dip. All good points. Thank you for listening to the pod, and I'm glad that you appreciate the type of content that we have produced and will continue to send out on a regular basis. Okay, let's start with the Ballard isn't afraid to double dip. He isn't afraid to double dip when he's talking trenches. Or mainly when he's talking defense. I guess he double dipped now that I think about it. But those are day 3 picks. You can't talk about day 3 picks. I'm talking Wilkins and Hines, same draft. Fountain, Kane, same draft. I'd be really surprised if he went wide out. Well, 2 wideouts in the first 3 rounds, okay, that would surprise me a little bit. 2 wideouts in the second round would really surprise me. And I go back to the quote that I mentioned on the podcast last week. Chris Ballard, and this is where I need Joey. I need Joey for so many things. Joey doesn't need me for anything, though. Joey would do a great Chris Ballard impression right here. When Ballard says, y'all stress over or obsess over wideouts, I obsess over the guys in the trenches. So when he takes Quentin Nelson and comes back and takes Braden Smith, it's because he's obsessed with the trenches. I just can't see him going back-to-back wideouts. But look, if I'm running the show, 2 wideouts in the first 3 rounds, that sounds a bit appealing to me. And for those points that you made. Now, I will say, when you talk about a rookie that could actually start, Ballard has been brutally honest in saying it's not a slam dunk that you find these guys that can just come in and start from day one at the receiver position. All right, speaking of the Manning Bowl, Matt wants to turn back the clock. I'm reliving the Manning and Luck years on NFL Game Pass. So much fun to watch these indie legends. If Ballard wants veteran leadership, how about bringing back Antoine Bethea so he can finish his career as a Colt? Depth and veteran leadership. First off, for those of you watching these old school games, I cannot believe that. I would say I've watched more old school basketball games lately. They used to not have the score on the freaking screen at all times. Hello? Am I supposed to memorize it? I mean, gosh, production quality has evolved so much. All right, Matt, Antoine Bethea. Personally, one of my favorite Colts. I love Antoine Bethea. Never should have left in, what year was that? 2013? LaRon Landry. God, that dude is nuts. Nuts. Bethea went to Arizona with Bruce Arians. Gregson with Landry. We saw how that ended up. Bethea is going to turn 36 in July. Do I think safety depth is a need? Yeah, I guess. You know, Malik Hooker 1, Kari Willis 2, George Odom 3. Who's your 4 right now? Roland Milligan. He's kind of played a little bit of a hybrid. So a fourth safety, but to me that fourth safety's got to play special teams. Is Bethea going to do that at age 36? And really, this is a move that it's not something Ballard has done. Now, again, he harped on veteran leadership, as you mentioned, a lot this offseason. But, yeah, that's the thing with these, like, Eric Berry, Antoine Bethea moves. You got to sit them down on the couch and be like, maybe 10 snaps a game, maybe 15 snaps. Like, are you good with that? So, maybe, but I kind of like a young, more of a hybrid. Another Marvell Tell. 6th-round pick on a guy like that. Don't you have 2 6-rounders, I think, this year? All right, JJ's back. JJ, has any NFL team been successful with only average and below quarterback, receiver, running back? Why does Ballard think this will work? JJ, just Marlon Mack, below average running back? Average? I don't think so. Rivers, is he a top 16 quarterback in the league? I would hope so. I'm not sitting here calling him top 10, but you know, I think what they believe in, and this goes back to the Hilton thing about those tiers. Wideout, in my mind, has got to improve without question. That is where I will 100% agree with you, JJ. Now, the Rivers thing is the Colts are steadfast that they believe that that they can get Rivers back into a top 10 guy. And then long-term, obviously, this is not a successful operation, but I will disagree with you about running back and just run game in general, which you got to factor in the offensive line into that. All right. Geez, I'm just mumbling. Quarantine's got me mumbling. It's March 31st. March has been so bleeping long. Happy birthday to my brother. Happy birthday to my brother-in-law, Ross. Happy birthdays. I love March. Great month. So, bro, Pacers fan, what have been your favorite places to hit up for takeout during the quarantine? Sam's Half Liter has a really cool takeout model now. And Mo and Johnny's has been clutch, too. Speaking of that, I think we're going to do a little Mo and Johnny's action tonight. I live very close to Mo and Johnny's. I'm craving some Fat Dan's. That's what I'm really craving right now. Got some Napoli's a few days ago before they shut down. We have a list up on our website. Check that out, 1075 The Fan. We got a list of all local restaurants that are available for takeout, carry out, those sorts of things. And if you have the means, certainly try and help out during this time. And how about you guys? I I miss a lot of things, obviously, and health is the most important thing throughout all of this, but just going to the bar and having 2 beers, 3 beers, and watching a game, I went with a handful of buddies watching the IU Minnesota game same night as Pacers Bucks and Butler Xavier, or whoever Butler played that night. Who Butler played? Providence, Seton Hall, somebody. None of those teams. I think Butler played Georgetown, actually. Yeah, just missed that. Went to Mo and Johnny's, though, for it. Great spot. Missed my local watering hole in Fountain Square. Haven't been there in a while, but shout out to Sam Silver Circle. Great spot. All right, about a handful more here. Maybe 7 more. All right, John. Hey, Kevin, love the show. Would love to hear your thoughts on which wideout you believe we should keep our eyes on in the draft. Also, which quarterback would you rather see under center next year? Jalen Hurts or Jacob Eason? All right, let's start with wideout. Denzel Mims, the Chenault kid out of Colorado, Michael Pittman, Chase Claypool. Those are some names that I keep on thinking of. Brandon Ayuk as well. Maybe T. Higgins. So yeah, those are some of the names. Quarterback under center, Eason or Hurts. Well, neither of them are going to be under center. Obviously, it's going to be Phillip Rivers, but I'm not obsessed with either, but I'll go with Hurts. Yeah. Hurts is starting to grow on me a little bit more. Eason just kind of rubs me the wrong way a little bit. But that seems to be the guy mocked to the Colts a little bit more here in these recent mock drafts. TJ, with the Colts going heavy on defense outside of Rivers and free agency, and then potentially signing a guy like Eric Berry or Tony Jefferson. With Tony Jefferson, again, where's he going to play? What would be your over-under for offensive players in the draft? For the sake of the exercise, let's say they stay at 7 picks. Thanks for the content, sir. Thank you for the question, TJ. Great question. Love over-unders. 7 picks, over-under. I will set it at 4.5 for offensive players selected. I'm going over. But I don't feel confident. Again, if I'm running the operation, I go over. 5. 2 wideouts. Quarterback. Tight end. Offensive tackle. Give me a hybrid DB and a defensive end and call it a day. I don't know. Is a defensive end even going to make the team? God, you had great depth on the D-line. Zach, hey, Kevin, great job on the podcast. With all the talk about drafting a QB and knowing what we know about Chris Ballard, I feel like if there was a guy that Ballard would draft in this class that not a lot of people are talking about, but he has high character, would be Jake Fromm. He played well at Georgia and produced, even unseated Jacob Eason and beat out Justin Fields. Even though he had a down year last year, I think he is being undervalued. Late second, even going into the 3rd round in some mocks, and Frank Reich can develop into a potential franchise quarterback. My mock draft article I posted on Monday on the site, Jake Fromm was the thumbnail image that I chose. He was a quarterback that had been mocked to the Colts in a few drafts. Boy, judging by a few of those mentions, I don't think people will be too happy about that. But having said that, Zach, you bring up a lot of good points. And I've tried to stress this. The Fromm pick, to me, he's not Rivers, 6'4", 230. But the intellect, the pre-snap ability, and it all goes back to those developmental traits. What can the coaching staff feel like they can develop? What can they not feel like they can develop? I'm not ruling them out at all. And you will hear this a lot out of me over the next few weeks. Got to throw a dart at the board. Got to. Just because it's not the high-quality dart, you throw it at the board. I think to myself, of like some current quarterback situations, and I talk about the Bills. The Bills, they took a QB in 2017 and 2016 and still drafted Josh Allen in 20, or felt the need to trade up for Josh Allen. Like, you're going to have some swings and you're going to have some misses. So you got to take more swings in my mind. I mean, how many swings have the Browns took? Just because you miss, I don't want to just all of a sudden say, boy, you're going to have one chance to do it. You better get it right. No, you need a backup as well. Like, all of those things. All right, this is from my man Hunt. I've got a great buddy called the Head Hunter, Scrapper1315. I don't believe this is him, but Hunt chimes in. Maybe it's his brother, Drew, or God, what's the other Hunt brother's name? I can picture him right now. Used to be my wife's boss, Dan Hunt. Best looking Hunt, Dan Hunt. All right. Hey, Kevin, big fan of the podcast and the show. Was just curious on your thoughts about the Colts possibly drafting Chase Claypool out of Notre Dame in the second round to help out the wideout group. And if not him, who are you seeing that you like for the Colts in the second round? Okay, I mentioned some wideouts earlier, but folks, let's lock in right here on Chase Claypool. I'm a fan. When I talk 50-50 balls, the epitome of that pass catcher, that's him. Like, go watch his highlight tape. And I'm going to get into this a little bit more on future podcasts, but I will stress enough, and I will bring some ammo to back it up when the time is to have the bigger discussion. Phillip Rivers thrives with big body wideouts. Some might make the argument that's really all he really works with at a high level. That's a fair argument to make. You got to have some big body guys. And even if Claypool, who's not a great route runner right now, and I wish he would have offered a little bit more yards after catch. With that body, I think there's more there. And some of that might be on Notre Dame, honestly. And hell, why we lost to Georgia. Played so bad against Michigan. But still, even if I don't get that out of Claypool, I'm getting a great special teams player. I'm getting a guy that's going to high point 50-50 balls and be such a great red zone threat, back shoulder, those sorts of things. Try not to be biased, but I like him. Craig doesn't get the quarterback situation. Rivers is an upgrade, but is short-term and rarely gets hurt. How is Brissett supposed to progress? Is he suddenly going to be the future after not getting in any games this year? I'll be really puzzled if the Colts draft a quarterback and don't trade Brissett immediately. Maybe this all foreshadows a draft day trade with Brissett. Well, like I said, unless you're going to get some great value, I almost think you ride things out with Jacoby Brissett until training camp. And, maybe someone gets hurt in the preseason. That's where I think his trade value could really go up. To me, it's just like I don't see anything that could happen this season unless Brissett plays that you're like, Phillip Rivers is done after 1 year. Jacoby Brissett is our starter in 2021. Yeah, and maybe Rivers plays 2 years. It's just, I just can't see that. And I honestly think that you make some really, really good points. And I think if the Colts trade back in this draft, which again, some people might scare away, is that bolstering draft capital for 2021 to make a big trade up for one of those guys? All right, 3 more here. Wyatt, do you think a part of Ballard's reasoning for signing Rhodes is to give Quincy Wilson an all-pro role model in a last attempt to salvage his career? He was the second player Ballard as Colts GM ever drafted, and the kid is talented. Wyatt, Xavier Rhodes got to worry about himself first. Nice bonus with leadership. Pierre Desir was a great leader, but again, Xavier Rhodes has got to get himself back on track first and tap into that talent. Andrew, if Rivers doesn't provide an upgraded quarterback, do we need to question this team's ability to judge quarterback talent? They seemed okay to run with Tolzien until the last minute. Traded for Brissett, who they touted as a top 15 QB. Then if Rivers doesn't upgrade the quarterback position, another failed QB in the building. Do we need to see if they draft a QB in the draft this year and how they perform if they play in 2021? Andrew also asks about Beers with Bowen. It'll be virtual. Maybe I talked about it on the last podcast. April 16th, 8 p.m. Eastern. Pencil that in your calendar. That's what we're going for. Well, it's what we're going for. Virtual. We'll be live. We'll have more details in the coming weeks. But, drink a beer. Get on the couch. quarantine with us week before the draft. We'll make it fun. As far as your question, okay, some of that is very fair. But to me, I think the main judge in my eyes is your long-term decision at quarterback. All of those are short fixes. Tolzien, Brissett, like, if you would have said Brissett's your starter in 2020, now we have a different story. But they didn't say that. And the whole Brissett top 15, 20, that was always odd to me. So, again, I think you just, it's more the long-term answer. All right, lastly from Tony. With the Colts signing Rivers to a one-year deal and with what seems to be no intention of trading Jacoby, is there a good chance they brought in Phil for a quick fix and to let Jacoby develop further from Phil's experience? Well, a little NC State tied to. Good point. NC State quarterbacks in this league. Maybe a little bit. It's not the craziest thought. But again, they don't feel like Jacoby's a top-level starter. If they did, they would have continued to have him be the quarterback. You don't stunt the growth like here in 2020 and then pick it back up in 2021. No, you just ride it out. But again, I still have that question of who's your starter and who's your backup in 2021. All right, everybody. Appreciate you tuning in to this edition of Kevin's Corner. Probably only one this week. I don't expect any other moves from the Colts. Again, 1075thefan.com has a lot of written content. The Frank Reich notebook is up over there. And if you have any thoughts on Beers with Bowen that you want to see here in a couple weeks, the virtual one, let me know. And if you ever have any Twitter questions, chime in the DMs or just tweet at me. And I usually see them over there. Lastly, stay safe. I know you're hearing that endlessly, and you're coming here for an escape with all of this. But, this coronavirus is starting to hit home a little bit more. And please stay safe. Practice social distancing. And as Frank Reich mentioned today, really think about those at most risk. Older people, elderly, certainly our first responders, people in healthcare, doctors, nurses. I think about my sister-in-law, two of my sisters-in-law that are both in healthcare, and just, people like that are just showing how brave they are and on the front line of this on a daily basis. So practice social distancing for sure. I know it sounds stupid to some people or just whatever, but that's the only way I think to currently fight this. And I'll keep the content coming. That'll be my promise to everybody out there. Everyone have a great rest of your week, great weekend. And if you have any questions, comments, KBowen1070 on Twitter. Later.
This has been Kevin Bowen. Thank you for listening to another edition of Kevin's Corner. If you haven't already, subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher for the best Colts and Pacers coverage.